This is John Geranich, Master Sharpener and President of Razor Edge Systems. John's interest in sharpening developed when he served as an Army barber. Over the past 30 years, his experimentation in the field has led to the development of the tool he calls the Razor Edge. Today, his company, Razor Edge Systems, markets top-quality sharpening equipment and is an international edge consulting firm in the meat, medical, film, and textiles industries. When he set the Guinness World Record for sharpening and shaving with a timber axe, he was the only man in the world with this ability. Since then, he has been joined in shaving competition by his son Joe. We are going to meet John and Joe in a minute. You might ask, why do they shave with butcher knives and axes? Solely to prove a point and demonstrate their abilities with the cutting edge, as well as the ability to teach others to easily and consistently sharpen their tools to a razor edge. Razor Edge Systems held a sharpening seminar at this Boy Scout Jamboree. In less than an hour, these scouts were not only taught how to sharpen, but also how to shave with a hunting knife. Then, they competed against each other using John and Joe's beards as testing ground. This was done to show that with the proper tools and knowledge of the fundamentals of sharpening, you can get unbelievable results. So keep watching. In this tape, we are going to show you these fundamentals, and then you will be able to easily and consistently get outstanding results while sharpening your tools.
John, before we get into our sharpening today, I think we should talk a little bit about why it's important to keep a sharp edge on all your cutting tools.
Well, a sharp edge, Randy, will glide easily and effortlessly through the material, whereas a dull edge will drag and require a lot of power to pull it.
A sharp knife is much more efficient than a dull one. There's a lot less wasted motion and effort in cutting, such as cutting your veggies and your meat. It's a lot more crisp and cleaner.
Cutting with a sharp knife is much more accurate. The reason for this is you don't have to use so much pressure to pull the knife. The more pressure you have to pull the knife, the more difficult your cut is and the more inaccurate it is.
But the most important reason in keeping a knife sharp is safety.
One of the reasons is because of slips. Slips are caused by dull knives, and so much pressure is being needed to pull the knife that it hangs up and the person loses control, the knife lets loose, and then of course you've got a serious injury.
Okay, keeping safety in mind, we're going to go to the shop now and show you how to sharpen your knife to a razor edge.
There's probably not a field more riddled with gimmicks than the sharpening field.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have a lot of gadgets in their drawers that are supposed to sharpen, but they don't work. So how do you tell if a sharpener is a gimmick or if it's really legitimate?
Well, to be a sharpener, a kit must have three things in it. It must, first of all, have proper abrasives. Secondly, it must have proper angle and control. And thirdly, a little technique. If you put all these together, you have a sharpener. Minus any one of them, and it will not work.
Okay, I've got a challenge for you. I brought two brand new identical knives. These are real popular hunting knives. Everybody that I talk to that has one says the same thing. It is really a tough knife to sharpen. Are these knives sharp now in the condition they come from the factory?
Usually not, Randy. Why don't we test one out and see what happens? Why don't you hand me that paper over there, Randy? Okay, the paper test is a valid test. You can tell a lot of things by it, but it doesn't necessarily mean because it cuts paper that it will cut something else. Let's try it. Nope. Now we're having a little problem here. It tears rather than cuts. Let's try the other knife. Let's try this one.
No, that one doesn't cut either.
Nothing happening here either. Okay, let's put this back and try our rope. Okay, hang on to the other end. And now notice when I put all this pressure on here, the problem of a slip. when it lets loose, you could go down and, of course, cut your leg or whatever.
Yeah,
Putting
that's
a
dangerous.
tremendous amount of pressure. Let's try the other knife, Randy, and see if this one is any different. This one is about the same. I would say they're fairly equal. But the ultimate test is, of course, the edge tester. The razor edge tester is held at about a 45-degree angle, and the blade, the cutting edge is put on there. It should stick into the blade as opposed to move up and down and slide on it. It does not do that.
That indicates a dull blade, then, if it slips.
That would be a dull blade, Randy. All right, let's try the other one. All right. This one also is dull because it does not grab into the razor edge tester.
Okay.
Now let's feel the cutting edge and see what that feels like. It is quite rough, which indicates it is also very dull. So we've determined that the knife is not really as good as it could be.
Okay, so the knives, when they come from the factory, are actually dull.
Yes.
Okay, the reason I brought two knives is that we can show the folks a before and after you sharpen. Now, what do we have to do to get this sharp? What's our first step?
Okay, the first step in the knife is to grind the knife back, because the knives, as they come to the factory, are normally not ground back properly. Now let's get into a little bit of edge design. Let's assume that we have cut this blade in half, and we are looking at the end. Now, when these knives were made, these blades were punched out on a punch press, and the end view would look something like this before it is ground back. It is of this shape. Now, this particular knife has this type of design. I will turn that around so it's a little more visible. It has this design. They have a ground back, but the problem is they should have ground back down further, closer to the cutting edge. Now, other knives have other problems. Other manufacturers use the same problem, but they still do not grind back properly right behind the cutting edge. Now, behind the cutting edge, the thinness or thickness is called the relief, and it is the most important thing on the knife. You must have good relief on a knife before you can get a cutting edge. Now, let's go back to this particular design. What we want to do, we want to grind it back until we have something like this. Now, what is the problem with sharpening? Very simple. A person purchases a knife like this or of another design. They usually use a fine hone, and what happens when they place their blade on the fine hone, the cutting edge is here, but they are, with a fine hone, trying to polish this edge out back here, and it has no effect whatsoever on the cutting edge. Now let's see what would happen if we were to taper that back to our other edge, if I can find it. Where did it go? Here it is. All right. Now we can see the two different ones. Now if we had that ground back properly, see the difference? When that edge was ground back on that coarse hone, just that tip of that edge would touch the fine hone and it would set very quickly, and of course sharpen your blade. Now we're going to have Joe grind back one of the blades, and it will take several minutes for him to do that.
Okay, so we'll keep this one over here and set it aside, and we'll do a comparison later.
Good, very good, Randy. The hone that Joe is using to grind in the relief on that blade is what we call the razor edge coarse. It's taken us many years to develop a hone that will cut quickly and efficiently and get the job done. Now you'll notice that we don't use any oil. Oil is an old wives' tale. All it does is cost you money, make a mess, and give you a poor edge. Now, if you want to clean this hone, we have a hone here, the coarse or the fine. We have a hone here that's been used. And notice how I just very simply spank out the material that's been in the hone, and that's all I have to do with it. And this hone was rather loaded up. We used this quite severely. It looks like Joe has got a pretty good relief on that knife. First of all, let's talk about the hone. You'll notice Joe's got his hone in a vise. put your hone in a vise or put it on a board like this or on a bench. Don't hold it in your hand because you will risk getting cut. Joe, let's take a look at this knife. Now, we can tell if the knife has got proper relief because these scratch marks or furrows that this coarse hone has made will go all the way down to the cutting edge, and then they will roll a little burr. If we were grinding on the bottom side, the burr would appear on the top, and you could feel the burr like this. Once you feel the burr, turn it over and grind it in. Also, you can see the furrow marks going all the way to the cutting edge, and there's no shine whatsoever. When you do that, you know you've got a very good relief, and you're ready for sharpening. Now, to sharpen any type of a blade, you've got to have three things to sharpen. Number one, you've got to have proper abrasives. Secondly, you've got to have proper angle and control. And thirdly, you've got to have proper technique. Let's talk about the hones first of all. You need two hones. First of all, you need a very coarse hone which will cut very rapidly. Now, the razor edge coarse hone is designed to do this. It's more or less on one end of the rope. Now, the razor edge fine hone is on the other end of the rope. It's extremely fine and will set the edge that the coarse hone has ground in.
Now that we have the perfect abrasive, now we need a way of keeping the perfect angle and the perfect control.
That's correct, Joe. That is why we invented the razor edge guide. Let's take a look at it and see how it works. Let's look first of all at the back of the razor edge guide. You'll notice that it has two screws. The reason for this is to give the perfect alignment on any type of a knife. Many knives are very thick. Some are thin. Some are tapered from the front to the back. So that we must have a guide that is adjustable so that the clamps fit firmly and solidly on the side. Let's put this guide on this particular knife. Now, I like to place the razor edge guide in my hand like this, slide the knife in like this, and I like to get approximately a ½ inch from the bottom of the clamp to the cutting edge. Now, this blade is a little deeper, and I can get a little more than a ½ inch. I've probably got something like 5/8 of an inch. Now, the distance from the tip to the tip of the razor edge guide is approximately the same as the distance from the guide to the cutting edge. Let's lock this one in here and see how close we've come. It's not an exact thing, just as long as it's close. Now, the distance from this rail provides the angle and the control for the flat edge of the knife. This point here provides the angle and the control for the curve and the point of the knife. Let's see how close we've come. It's very close. It's a little longer, but it's very close. Now that I've got this mounted on here, we're going to give it to Joe, and we're going to let him grind in a burr. But first of all, before Joe does this, I want to emphasize something. If we had not ground in our knife before, if we would have just used the knife, and if we would have wanted to resharpen it, we would first have to put that blade down flat on this coarse hone and grind in a little bit on both sides. Do that each time that you sharpen. That's very important. Always taper back your blade a little bit every time you sharpen it.
Razor edge down first, then your knife. Go in a circular motion or back and forth, whichever one you prefer. I prefer my circular motion. Get up on the tip. Just raise up a little bit. You never want that razor edge guide to come off your hone. Just work it in back and forth until we get our burr.
Now feel for your burr, Joe. I think you might have one. You did a pretty good job of tapering in your blade.
We have a very good burr, Dad.
Do you have one in the back, though, Joe?
I lack a little bit right back in here.
Try to get a little bit in the back there. That's an important part of the blade, too. Now let's take a little look, a more of a microscopic look at what Joe is really doing on this coarse hone. First of all, let's go back and see what we had to begin with. First of all, we had something like this. This was our factory grind. Then what we did, Joe tapered back the blade so that we had something like this. Now what we're going to do, we are going to increase our angle slightly and put on two things, a primary and a secondary edge face, which is the actual edge face that does the cutting. Now, we're going to be looking at a small portion of the tip on this. Let's say just this much, and we have blown that up into a little model here, which would look something like this if the knife were to be used. And we've got to figure that you're going to be using your knife, and the knife is going to get dull, so you will be going back to sharpening, won't you? First thing you do, obviously, you're going to taper in your blade. You're going to lie it flat on the hone, the coarse hone that is, and you're going to grind it in. But you'll end up something like this. Now what we have to do, we have to put a primary and a secondary edge face on this. So let's see how that's done with these little models here. We will put this, we will increase the angle, we will have our razor edge guide on, and we will grind and grind and grind until we get a flat spot along this edge. When this edge here meets this part over here, this edge over here, it will form a little burr on the tip here, and we will feel that burr again. Now, this is what it will look like. If this is ground and ground till it's flat, this side will meet this side over here at this common point. We will feel a little burr. Then we will know that we have to turn it over and grind the burr in on this side so that this side here meets this side at this common point, and it will form a burr coming up in this direction. We can then feel that burr. Now what we would have something like this. This is our secondary edge face. This is ground in on the coarse hone. Its thickness, remember, this is microscopic, is probably the thickness from here to here of, we'll say a thick piece of thread, maybe a thin piece of string. But the thinner it is, the better the edge we will get. Now what we want to do, we want to have a fine edge put on this. Remember, we've got a coarse edge along the entire edge of the knife. What we're going to do, we're going to increase the angle just very slightly. Then we will stroke back and forth in alternate directions and put our cutting edge on, which would be something like this. These are our secondary edge faces, ground in by the coarse hone. The primary edge face is this very small part into here. Your fine hone will not remove a lot of material, just a very small amount of material. And you should see this under a good light is just a very shiny spot along the edge. The better the relief on the blade, the easier it is to get a good edge, and the better the edge will be. All right, now Joe's getting a burr on the one side.
Got a burr.
You got a burr on the one side. Now he's going to turn it over on the other side, and he's going to get a burr on this side. Now if you've done a good job on tapering your relief back, it won't take you very many strokes to get a good burr. Now you can go in a circular motion. You're going straight back and forth. Doesn't really matter. Not on this coarse hone, it doesn't. All right, now Joe, check and see if you've got a burr on that.
Very good, nice, very good, Burr.
Okay, Joe. Now, while Joe is changing from the coarse hone to the fine hone, we're going to double edge, and we're going to explain what double edging is. Double edging is simply raising the knife blade a few degrees up onto your fine hone. This is how it is accomplished. Open up the razor edge just a little bit so that you can slide it, and move the blade back, even 1/8 of an inch, which is roughly the thickness of this little wrench. Also move it toward the tip of the blade because you want to increase the angle not only on this part of the blade, but also on the curved and the point of the blade also. Then what we're going to do, we're going to tighten it back down again.
Make sure they are tight.
Real nice and tight. Snug them in, but don't over tighten them. And we're going to hand it back to Joe, and he's going to put the primary edge face on it. Go ahead, Joe.
Razor edge down first to the heel of the knife. Draw it across your stone and make sure your tip of the knife leaves the razor edge hone first before your razor edge guide does. Go very slow. You don't want to go fast, because fast you will hurt yourself.
And watch that cutting edge wipe that fine abrasive. It all has to wipe it from the heel of the knife all the way to and including the tip. Remember, the tip is the most important part of the blade, especially if you're a professional. And you'll need about a dozen strokes on each side, Joe, if you've done a good job of grinding back your relief, and you certainly have on that.
Okay, I'm going to take 2 more swipes here, and we'll see how we did. I'm sure we've got we've got a beautiful edge on here. Just beautiful.
Well,
try that, Dad.
Well, this is the only way to try it.
Should be very, very smooth.
Extremely smooth. I can't feel a thing. It's just like waving it through the air. Now, at a 45-degree angle, it should stick in there as opposed to slide down. And it does. Let's try it way on the tip. It hangs in to the razor edge tester, even in the back of the blade. So you have a very, very good edge, Joe.
Dad, we got a real good edge on here. We've got the razor edge on here.
Yeah, let's see it here. Yeah, it looks like it's all right. Randy, why don't you get in here and let's take a look at this.
Okay, Joe thinks he's got it sharp. Let's check it out.
Okay.
Let's test it on this paper first.
Alrighty, let's see what we've got here. There we go. That's not good.
Well, that looks sharp. Okay, for the sake of comparison, let's take this other knife that you haven't touched yet. See what that says. Oh yeah, big difference. Let's
No
do the test on our
comparison.
rope.
Well, okay, Randy, let's see what we've got here.
Ooh, that's a little different than it was last time.
Yeah, let's try
Where's
the other
that first
knife.
knife?
Okay.
Now that would be a dangerous edge, wouldn't it?
That sure would.
This
is
That's
the
what they
new
call a
knife.
hang-up, and that one's a little better. Let's try a little easier here.
That's the razor edge.
And with the new knife,
Okay. The true test is on the razor edge tester. Let's see what they say on that.
okay, at a 45-degree angle, it's got to hang in there as opposed to slide down, and it does. Then we've got to test it for smoothness. Very smooth, especially in through there. Now we've got to test the edge to make sure there are no microscopic nicks in it. Very, very, very smooth. All right, now let's test the other edge.
Whoops.
This slides down, doesn't it? It's dull. And of course, if it failed the first test, it would obviously fail all the others. The edge is very rough. In addition, it does not hang in at a 45-degree angle, so the blade is dull.
That's dull. That's the way it came from the factory.
Yes. We've told you how to sharpen a knife. You now have the means to put a razor edge on any type of a knife. Just do it exactly as we have shown you and you'll never fail. Your edge will always be a razor edge. Now let's talk about something else. Let's talk about safety. Safety is very, very neglected when it comes to knives or other edged tools. First of all, never sharpen or use an edge tool when you've been using drugs or alcohol.
And remember, a sharp knife is a safe knife to use. Most people have the misconception that a sharp knife is dangerous and that as it gets duller, it gets safer to use. This is false. This is partially due to the fact that people respect a sharp knife a lot more than they do a dull knife. Just like a loaded gun. If you've got a gun that you know is loaded, you respect it, you're more careful with it. When you've got a knife that is dull, you're going to get careless with it, and this sets the stage for an accident.
If we were to pinpoint the main cause of cuts, and certainly serious cuts, the cause would be slips. Now, a slip is usually caused by a dull knife, and the reason for it is this. A person will put a knife into a piece of meat or whatever they're trying to cut. It could be cardboard or whatever. And they try to pull it. The dull edge resists the forward movement of the knife, and so what do? They add more power to compensate for them. As they add power, they lose control. And all of a sudden, the knife lets loose and comes forward, and that's where they get cut.
Well, I know when I deer hunt and my knife starts getting duller, I can feel myself getting a little bit more careless with my cutting because my knife is getting duller and I have to put so much power behind it. And as a result, I have slipped myself once in a while.
As your muscles become more and more tired, you obviously will slip more and more frequently. Another reason there are a lot of cuts, and this is especially true with the non-professional, the sportsman or whatever, is many times a person will be using a knife and they will have to pull something. Maybe it's a skin or whatever. Instead of lying their knife down and doing the pulling, they will simply grab a hold of the skin or whatever and they'll pull on it. And of course, an unexpected problem would be that the skin would let loose and the person would become injured with the knife. So do not do anything with the exception of cutting with a knife in your hand. Take your knife, put it down, and then do your pulling and then pick up your knife when you need it later on.
Also very important is analyze your cut before you make it. Every cut you make, you should check out and think ahead. What's going to happen if that knife lets loose? If the answer is you're going to cut yourself or someone else, you better change your plans. There are times when you do have to cut towards yourself. If that's the case, don't pull with your arm, but stiffen out your arm and your shoulder. Pull with your whole arm and shoulder. Then if the knife lets loose, it's not going to travel very far. Contrast this with a knife that is held in an arm that is wound up like a spring. If it lets go, it's going to travel a great distance. The chance of an injury is great. So always clear yourself and never try to cut towards yourself if at all possible.
Also, a knife is not designed for cutting cans. It is not a screwdriver. The purpose for it is cutting and cutting only. Do not throw your knife because you could get seriously hurt by it and also wreck your knife.
Let's talk about knife safety and knife design. When you choose a knife, don't get a blade that's too long. Secondly, always get one with a little tab that prevents your hand from slipping up onto the blade. And get a handle that is comfortable, preferably with a little something in the back that prevents your hand from pulling off the back. If the knife happens to be a folding knife, by all means use the lock blade system. The thing you don't need is a blade folding over your hands. Essentially, knife safety is good common sense. Think things out before you do it, study it out a little bit, and do it slow motion, and you won't get cut.
Let's quickly review what we've covered in this session. First of all, remember the 3 key words in sharpening: proper abrasives, proper angle and control, proper technique. If a sharpener lacks any one of these 3, it's a gimmick that will give you nothing but frustration. Then there is relief, the thickness directly behind the cutting edge. Most knives come from the factory with a blade that is far too blunt. To correct this, lay your blade almost flat on the coarse hone and grind away enough metal to give you a good thin taper on your blade. To do your actual sharpening, use the razor edge guide for positive results. This will give you the proper angle and control that is necessary for a good edge, which is almost impossible to get by sharpening free-handedly. With the razor edge mounted on your blade, grind in a circular motion on the coarse hone until you can feel a burr along the entire length of the blade. Then, flip the knife over and do the same on the other side. Make sure the burr runs the entire length of the blade. This is very important. Now, reposition the razor edge about 1/8 inch toward the cutting edge, which increases your angle several degrees. Now on the fine hone, use alternate strokes only, always into the cutting edge, once on one side and once on the other. After about 10 strokes on each side, lighten up and finish with about 4 strokes using just the weight of the knife. Carefully remove the razor edge and test your blade on the edge tester. This concludes this program on how to sharpen your knife to a razor edge. We hope you've enjoyed watching and have really learned something that you can now use for the rest of your life and even pass on through generations. If you are interested in a more involved study of edge technology, we strongly recommend that you get our advanced sharpening video. That program is much more in-depth and covers things like different types of steel in a blade, microscopic pictures of an edge, the proper way to steel an edge, and how to keep your edge sharp. We also have videos on how to sharpen fishhooks and how to sharpen arrowheads. And of course, we have a complete line of sharpening tools and equipment so that you can professionally sharpen virtually any tool with the cutting edge.
The fellows at Razor Edge are known for one thing. They're known for shaving with the axe. And this happens to be our logo. It's on all of our products. So when you're looking for sharpening equipment, look for the lumberjack shaving with an axe, and you'll know you will get sharp edges.
John Juranich has written the first complete book on sharpening, the Razor Edge Book of Sharpening. His company, Razor Edge Systems, makes a full line of sharpening tools and equipment. If your dealer doesn't have Razor Edge equipment on hand, contact us at this address. Razor Edge Systems Incorporated, P.O. Box 150, Ely, Minnesota 55731, or call area code 218-365-6419.